you ever earned more money at some point in your life and still felt insecure? That's where it all started for me. I wasn't starving, my bills were paid, but every night when the silence fell, an automatic thought would come along. What if it's missing? Cell phone in hand, bank app open, checking the balance for the third time, and an anxiety that didn't match reality. At the time, I thought that was responsibility. Today, I know it was a mental pattern. Cognitive behavioral therapy calls this dysfunctional automatic thought, quick interpretations of reality that seem like facts, but are just stories the brain tells. And according to classic studies by Aaron Beck, these thoughts shape emotions and behaviors, even when they're wrong. My name is Bruno. I'm a psychologist, and today we're going to talk about 17 lessons from financial psychology that changed my life. Your brain reacts to the meaning of money, not to money itself. That's when I understood something unsettling. My financial problems didn't just stem from a lack of money, they came from a psychology of scarcity. Research by Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir shows that the feeling of scarcity, even when it is not real, reduces cognitive ability, worsens decision-making, and increases impulsivity. In other words, the more threatened you feel, the worse your decisions become. I started noticing patterns. When I felt insecure, I avoided looking at bank statements. He postponed important decisions, or spent impulsively to relieve anxiety. Avoiding looking at money isn't laziness, it's a form of emotional protection. CBT explains this as experiential avoidance, to avoid immediate discomfort even if it worsens the problem in the long run. That's when I realized something even deeper. I hadn't learned how to handle money, I had learned to fear money. In childhood, money was always associated with fighting, stress, or guilt. According to developmental psychology, beliefs formed early tend to become unquestioned internal truths. You don't handle money like an adult, you handle money like you learned when you were a child. When I started questioning those beliefs, something changed. Not in the bank balance, but in the way I thought. And that was just the beginning. More money won't fix a mind trained for scarcity. Research shows that people with a scarcity mindset tend to overestimating risks, underestimating resources, and focus on the short term. This has been demonstrated in studies published in Science, Mullainathan and Shafir, showing that scarcity hijacks attention. And I realized this in practice. When money was tight, I made bad decisions. But when there was any left over, I'd drink some too. Intense emotion, whether fear or euphoria, often leads to poor financial decisions. Behavioral psychology calls this emotional state bias. When we are emotionally aroused, the rational brain, prefrontal cortex, gives way to impulsive decisions. That's when I understood another dangerous pattern. I was confused. Reward deserved, consumption with rest, spending on emotional relief. Many purchases are not financial, they're emotional. According to studies on emotional spending, spending money may provide momentary stress relief, but it increases guilt and anxiety afterward, creating a vicious cycle. And the cycle was clear: tension, expense, relief, guilt, more tension. In CBT, this is called negative reinforcement. The behavior persists because it provides relief in the short term, even though it causes destruction in the long term. When I started tracking my expenses, something became obvious. The biggest leaks weren't in the value, they were in the emotional state where I used to buy it. If you don't understand your emotions, money becomes your emotional regulator. Another thing that changed everything was realizing how I was talking to myself. You're terrible with money. That will never change. You always screw things up. That's not healthy self-criticism. It is internal punitive dialogue. Financial shame doesn't motivate, it paralyzes. Studies show that shame reduces the likelihood of behavioral change. It generates escape, denial, and self-sabotage. When I stopped treating myself as the problem and started treating the standard as the problem, something was unlocked. And that's when I started to rebuild my relationship with money in a practical way, without motivational phrases, without illusions. Financial organization isn't about control, it's about predictability. I used to think that controlling expenses was like being in prison, but studies show that the brain reduces anxiety when it can predict the future, even if it's not perfect. When I started tracking my expenses, I wasn't stressed anymore. I felt calmer, because fear lives in the unknown. Financial anxiety thrives in the dark. Psychology calls this intolerance of uncertainty. The less clarity there is, the more the brain imagines catastrophic scenarios. Another important change. I stopped asking, can I spend? And I started asking myself, is this aligned with what I want for my life? Each financial decision is, at its core, a decision of personal value. According to acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, living well means acting in accordance with values, not momentary impulses. When my spending wasn't aligned with my values, the guilt would come later. When I was there, even when spending money, peace remained, and that changes everything. Another uncomfortable lesson was accepting time. I wanted to resolve everything quickly, getting out of a tight spot in months, to make up for years of mistakes. Financial haste often leads to relapses. Studies on behavior change show that unrealistic goals increase the likelihood of giving up. The brain interprets failure as proof of incapacity and abandons the process. That's when I understood that financial stability is training, not talent. Small consistency beats heroic effort. Save a little, but always. Review your expenses weekly, not obsessively. Adjust, don't punish. Behavioral neuroscience shows that habits are best formed with predictable rewards and gradual challenges. Another important turning point was learning to separate identity from outcome. Previously, a financial mistake would turn into, I am irresponsible. Then it turned into, that was a bad decision. What do I learn from it? You are not your bank statement. This change reduces guilt and increases learning, something widely studied in educational and clinical psychology. Finally, one of the most ignored lessons. Talking about money heals more than hiding it. People who talk openly about finances, they make better decisions, they feel less ashamed, they ask for help earlier. Emotional isolation keeps dysfunctional patterns alive. When I stopped pretending that everything was under control, I actually started to have some control. Financial security is not the absence of fear, it's the ability to deal with it. Psychology shows that trying to eliminate fear only strengthens it. According to approaches such as ACT and cognitive therapy, the goal is not to feel, but not being governed by feeling. Today, when fear arises, I don't obey automatically. I'm watching, I question it, and I choose. This changes everything. The last lesson was the hardest to accept. Money amplifies who you already are. It doesn't heal emotional wounds. If you live with anxiety, more money will amplify that anxiety. If you live avoiding problems, more money only changes the scenario of the escape. Studies in positive psychology show that after a certain income level, the impact of money on well-being is limited. What sustains peace is clarity, purpose, psychological sense of control. When I stopped using money as a promise of salvation, it finally stopped controlling me. Today, my financial life is not perfect, but it is aware. I know, why do I spend? Why am I saving money? And why do I choose to wait? And that's worth more than any number.